Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we'll be discussing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 20th April 2020. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 9 talks about the limitations of WHO which have been highlighted during the handling of COVID-19 pandemic. And in this article, Dr. Shashi Tharoor has highlighted some of the limitations in the functioning of World Health Organization, and he has argued that these limitations have been imposed on WHO by the member states themselves. And this is mainly because the WHO is dependent upon the member states for its functioning, and it lacks some kind of independence. So this can be a very important part for us from the General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations and under the topic Important International Institutions, Agencies, their structure and mandate, and also the way they have been functioning. Now the way World Health Organization has handled the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the loopholes in its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic have already been discussed in the Daily News Simplified of 30th March 2020. And in that discussion, the mandate structure, etc., and the way of functioning of the WHO have also been discussed. For example, it has been highlighted that WHO is a specialized agency of the United Nations. And also, what are the broad objectives of the World Health Organization? And these are the eradication, development of vaccines, controlling of important diseases, and creating awareness, etc. Further, various other aspects have also been discussed regarding the World Health Organization. Now, in that discussion, some of the allegations have been forwarded against the World Health Organization. And the allegation against the World Health Organization is that it did not hold China accountable for misreporting about the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, even till January, the World Health Organization insisted that there was no human-to-human transmission of this disease. And thirdly, it warned the nations against imposing any kind of travel bans on flights from China, and also it delayed the declaration of COVID-19 as a pandemic. And this response of the World Health Organization towards the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the limitations in its functioning. So in this regard, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who was the Under Secretary General of the United Nations, has highlighted that it is not the fault of WHO per se, and it is the fault of the member nations who are the part of World Health Organization, and that is mainly because the WHO depends upon these member states. So let us look at some of the issues that have been highlighted by Dr. Shashi Tharoor regarding the functioning of World Health Organization, and also he has provided certain suggestions, and they can be very important for us from the mains examination point of view. Now, regarding the WHO's response towards the COVID-19, it has been argued that COVID-19 is an unprecedented disease, and since the establishment of World Health Organization, the world has not witnessed such a big level of pandemic. Secondly, in the functioning of WHO, there is dominance of global powers, and it is said that any United Nations body is a hostage of its most powerful member states. And this aspect can be seen even in the functioning of UN, and particularly in the functioning of the Security Council. And in the functioning of the Security Council, the 5 most powerful nations of the world are the only permanent members of the Security Council. And these member nations have veto power in their functioning of the Security Council. And that has led to many wars across the globe. So in this line, the author argues that if a COVID-19 kind of situation had started from the United States of America, the WHO would have probably towed the lines of United States of America as well as it had towed the line of China in the case of COVID-19. Further, the author highlights that the blame lies on the way the Chinese state operates, and this is because there is difference in the way the US functions and the Chinese state functions, and that is because the United States of America is a democracy and it has a free press. And being a democracy and having a free press, United States of America would not have found it easy to suppress the kind of details China has been suppressing. And we note that under international pressure, China has recently revised the number of casualties in the state of Wuhan. And this shows that China had been deliberately suppressing the information regarding the fatalities because of COVID-19 pandemic. Further, the manner of election of the World Health Organization's head also makes it dependent upon the member states. And it is said that the head of the agency, who is elected after the support of powerful member states, does not enjoy the independence and autonomy that should come with a position of that stature. Further, the WHO does not function independently and it relies on the data which is submitted to it by the member states. And this was particularly the reason why the World Health Organization was very relaxed in the first few weeks of the COVID-19 outbreak. And that was because the World Health Organization relied mainly on the information that was provided to it by the Chinese state. And it also needs to be noted that WHO cannot on its own or independently go and verify the information which is provided by the member states. And in this line, it needs to be highlighted that if the WHO wanted to independently verify the information that was provided by the China, there would have been chances that the Chinese government would have denied visa to the WHO officials. And that is what made WHO dependent upon the information that was provided by the China to it. And that led to the poor response from the World Health Organization towards the handling of COVID-19 outbreak. So in this line, the author has suggested two reforms that India should push for at the World Health Organization. First is regarding the strengthening of the autonomy of the World Health Organization and also giving more power to the World Health Organization. And in this line regarding the autonomy of the WHO, it is said that autonomy of WHO is the most important thing. And in this line, it is argued that if the autonomy of the institution and the independence of the heads of these institutions is ensured, that will be a key factor in the independent functioning of such organizations. And secondly, more power should be given to the World Health Organization and it should be allowed to independently go and verify the information that is provided by the member states. And as such, the members of the WHO should not have the authority to deny a visa or travel permission to its officials. And that will make the WHO powerful in independently verifying the information that is provided by the various member state governments. And had the WHO independently verified the information that was provided by the Chinese government, the corona outbreak would have been handled more effectively. So these are some of the issues that have been highlighted by the author regarding the functioning of the WHO, and also these are the two suggestions that have been provided which India needs to push at the World Health Organization. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 6 talks about the social vaccine as an effective way of handling the pandemics like the COVID-19. Now in this line, we already know that various biomedical vaccines are being tested across the globe. However, the authors argue that social vaccine can be a very effective tool in handling the pandemics like the COVID-19 pandemic. And this particular aspect, that is what is a social vaccine and how it works and what India needs to do, can be very important for us from the General Studies paper 2 under the topic social justice and especially under the topic issues relating to the management of health sector. So first let us look at what is meant by this term social vaccine. So social vaccine is simply a term which is used to describe the strategies which are adopted by the government to enforce a series of social and behavioral changes in a population to fight a social ill. And it is commonly applied by the governments to mobilize the population to adopt the socio-economic, cultural and attitudinal changes to tackle a public health concern. So the social vaccine is mainly aimed at behavioral change in the public to fight a public health concern. Now, what are the essential components of this social vaccine? So the first component of this social vaccine is the social and behavior change communication strategies. And examples of this strategy can include social distancing strategy, declaration of a disease as a pandemic or an epidemic, and also recognition of a disease as a national disaster. And for example, India has been invoking laws like the National Disaster Management Act 2005, the Epidemics Act in various states, and also Essential Commodities Act has been invoked regarding the handling of COVID-19 pandemic. Further, the second important aspect of the social vaccine is the dissemination of information, education and communication, that is IEC. So in this regard, an example of this strategy can be regular and accurate communication about the nature of disease, the infection rates of the disease, effectiveness of various social distancing methods, and also personal infection risk, etc. So these can include some of the strategies under the dissemination of information, education, and communication. So these are the two important components of social vaccine. Now, after this, let us look at what are the lessons that can be learned from the way in which the HIV/AIDS has been handled. Now, the handling or the experience of HIV pandemic is a perfect case study of social vaccine. And regarding this, you should note that the HIV was declared as a pandemic by the World Health Organization in 1985. And at that time, there was no effective vaccine against the HIV. And it was only as late as 1995 that highly active antiretroviral treatment was established. Until 1995, the strategy that was employed to tackle the HIV transmission was that of social vaccine strategy, and it was applied particularly in Uganda and in Thailand. So first let us look at what was the social and behavioral change strategy that was applied to control the HIV pandemic. Now we note that HIV is predominantly transmitted through sexual transmission and also through intravenous drug use. And in this line, various preventive messages were disseminated against the way in which this infection is transmitted. So the focus was mainly on highlighting the importance of having one sexual partner, having 100% use of condoms in case of multiple sexual partners, and also reduction for intravenous drug use. Again, the information, education, communication strategy was also employed in the handling of HIV pandemic. And in this line, the religious and community leaders were mobilized as key agents of change. And in this line, the Catholic Church in Uganda, which did not support the use of condoms, changed their stance to spread the message of using the condoms. Again, Thailand employed various social marketing tools to promote the use of condom for safe sex. And in India, a law was passed recently in the year 2017 to prohibit the discrimination against the HIV patients. And this act is particularly known as the HIV and AIDS Syndrome Prevention and Control Act 2017. So these were some of the information, education and communication strategies that were deployed to control the HIV pandemic in different countries. And we note that this strategy has worked in handling the HIV besides the biomedical controls that have been deployed for handling this pandemic. So now how this social vaccine for COVID-19 can help India in controlling the pandemic of COVID-19. Now we note that India has adopted a hybrid model for handling the COVID outbreak. And in this we have been adopting the model of lockdown and also infection control. However, the biggest concern regarding the India strategy is the low levels of testing in India and especially of asymptomatic transmission carriers in India. And in that background, the asymptomatic transmission chains is a big cause of worry for handling of COVID-19 outbreak in India. So what could be the important components of effective social vaccine strategy in handling of the COVID-19 outbreak in India? So first is the regular infection control messages from the ICMR and also from the Health Ministry. And again, enforcing of the norms of social distancing, and that is being done currently through the lockdown. Further, there is a need for promotion of healthy practices like washing of hands, using a mask, etc. And also, leaders should be employed to effectively disseminate information, and it can be done by popular sportspersons, cine stars, etc., which have a good connect with the people at large. Now, besides this, what needs to be done is that a social vaccine should allow people to hold the leaders accountable, particularly in areas of rapidly increasing or scaling up of testing, also fulfilling the basic and economic needs of the vulnerable sections, providing psychological support where it is needed, and also providing adequate personal protective equipments to the frontline workers. And also there is a need for focusing on and ensuring the steady supply of essential services. So in this article, we have learned what is meant by social vaccine, what are the important strategies that are deployed in a social vaccine. Again, we have looked at the case study in which how the outbreak of HIV was handled, and that is a perfect example of social vaccine, and how effective it is. So in this line, we have also looked at how India is using a hybrid model, and what more needs to be done has also been discussed. And these aspects can be very important for us from the mains examination point of view. Now in this line, it needs to be highlighted that we have already discussed the development of the biomedical vaccine. So let us again revise from that video as to what are the key developments that are taking place across the globe regarding the development of biomedical vaccination against the COVID-19 disease. And in this, we will look at various aspects of the vaccination and how the vaccinations help in developing immunity against diseases. And also we'll look at what are the current developments regarding the development of this vaccine. And in this, we will briefly look at the mRNA vaccine which is being developed in the United States of America and how will it function or how it is supposed to function in the near future. So simply, the principle of vaccination is based on the property of memory of the immune system. And generally, the immunity that is present in the human body is of two types, that is the innate immunity, and the second is that of acquired immunity. Now the innate immunity is inbuilt in the human body, and this innate immunity is reflected or represented in the form of physical barriers that are present in our body. So for example, the skin cover that we have is also a kind of innate immunity system that is present in the body. Second type of immunity is known as the acquired immunity, and that can be acquired in two ways. One is the active way and the second one is the passive way. And under the active acquired immunity system, the host is exposed to antigens. And in response to this, the human immune system produces antibodies. And as such, a vaccine is the substance that resembles the disease-causing agent or the pathogen but does not cause the disease. And it trains the body's immune system to recognize and kill the pathogen and create a memory for the future. So basically, the process of vaccination is built on the memory of the immune system for the future. And for this, the human body is exposed to the disease-causing agent or a pathogen which resembles the disease-causing agent. And that creates or develops the immunity in the human body. Now, what are the different ways in which the vaccines can be developed? So the first way is to develop the inactivated vaccine. And under this, the pathogen can be grown outside the body itself, and then it is purified and inactivated with chemicals. And this particular process is being experimented by China presently for the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now previously this method has already been used, and this is reflected in the injectable polio vaccine that is being used across the globe. Second type of development of vaccination is the weakened vaccine, and under this, the pathogen is considerably weakened by repeated culture or by genetic means. And oral polio vaccination is a type of weakened vaccine. And the third way in which the vaccine can be developed is that one of the proteins on the pathogen surface can be produced artificially, and it can be used to raise the immunity of the human system. And this process for the development of the vaccine has been used in the development of hepatitis B vaccine. So these are few ways in which the vaccines are developed across the globe. Now presently what China is experimenting is based on the inactivated vaccine system, while the way in which the United States of America is developing the vaccine for COVID-19 is based on the third method. Now how do these vaccines help? So let us look at the biology behind the importance of these vaccines. So our body, when it encounters a pathogen for the first time, produces a response which is called as the primary response. And this kind of primary response by the immune system is of low intensity. And once the human body has produced this primary response, and in future, if it subsequently again encounters the same pathogen, it provides a highly intensified secondary response. And this secondary response, which is of highly intensified nature, is because of the memory of the immune system of the first encounter with that kind of pathogen. Now, how are these primary and secondary responses taking place in the human body? So these primary and secondary immune responses are carried out with the help of two types of lymphocytes which are present in our blood, and they are the beta lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. Now, an important thing to be noted about the B lymphocytes is that they produce an army of proteins in response to the pathogens in our blood, and these proteins are called as antibodies. Now, while the beta lymphocytes themselves produce these proteins which are antibodies, the T lymphocytes themselves do not secrete any kind of antibodies. And this can be a particularly important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view, that the T cells or the T lymphocytes themselves do not secrete any antibodies. However, they help the B lymphocytes or the beta cells to produce these antibodies. And this is how, by the working of these B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, the human body is able to produce such primary and secondary immune responses. So now, how are the vaccines being developed against the COVID-19 disease? So first one is being developed by China, and as we have learned that it will be an inactivated vaccine development. And this is being done by purifying the COVID-19 virus, and which will be killed by the usage of formaldehyde. However, the US is developing a weakened vaccine, and it will use the genetically engineered COVID-19 virus that replicates poorly, and this will be used to develop the human immune response system. And the kind of vaccine which is being developed by the United States of America is popularly known as the mRNA vaccine. So let us look at the key aspects of this mRNA vaccine. So now the vaccine that is being developed by the United States of America is the mRNA vaccine. Now you might be knowing that the genetic coding of a living organism is stored in the double helix structure which is known as DNA. And these DNAs store all the genetic information of the living organisms. Now these DNAs produce proteins which are responsible for every function in the human body. And the conversion of these DNA codes into proteins requires a single-stranded molecule which is known as the mRNA or the messenger ribonucleic acid. So this vaccine, which is known as the mRNA 1273, is a piece of RNA that carries the code to make the COVID-19 virus spike protein when it is introduced into the cells. And this protein, which is present on the virus's surface, is critical for the entry into the cells. And the immunity to this spike protein, which is critical for the entry of this virus into the cells, can be blocked by the introduction of the vaccine, which is known as mRNA 1273, because it will do a slow inoculation of the spike protein in the human body. And as such, the human body will start developing the antibodies which will stop or block the entry of the virus and its multiplication. And as such, it can be an effective vaccine against the COVID-19 disease. So in this article, we have briefly looked at the mechanism of vaccination, how the vaccines help, and what is the role played by the beta lymphocyte cells and the T lymphocyte cells. And also, how is this mRNA vaccine going to help us in countering the COVID-19 disease? Now, this mRNA vaccine development is still at the trial stage, and still it will require some months to be produced commercially and to be an effective cure of the COVID-19 disease. So with this, let's take up the next news article. Now this article on page number 10 talks about the recently released report by the World Bank, which is a biennial report of the World Bank regarding the South Asia, and it is known as South Asia Economic Focus. And in this report, the World Bank has highlighted that there is going to be economic slump in the South Asian region because of the COVID-19 outbreak, and it highlights that there can be food shortages in the South Asian region because it remains one of the most populated regions of the world. So in this regard, let us look at what are the key highlights of this report of the World Bank and what are some of the suggestions that have been provided by the World Bank to handle this economic crisis. And these can be important for us from General Studies paper 3 under the topic economic development. Now, some of the highlights of the World Bank's report are that it is a unique economic crisis which has been hastened by the COVID-19 outbreak. Again, the South Asian region remains highly vulnerable because of the highest population densities in the world. And again, the economic outlook also looks grim for the South Asian region. And as a result of this economic crisis, there can be increase in higher inequalities in this region. So let us look at all these points in detail. So first is that it highlights that this economic crisis is unique in nature, and it is mainly because this economic crisis is on account of both the demand as well as supply side disruptions, and this has mainly been because of the lockdowns or the economic lockdowns that have been imposed across the South Asian region. Secondly, the disruption has been seen in almost all the sectors of economy, and which include both the manufacturing sectors as well as the services sectors. And we note that India is mainly dependent upon the services sector, and other neighboring countries of India in the South Asia are dependent upon manufacturing. And thirdly, there can be instances of panic buying of food commodities, and it can lead to dangers of food security in the South Asian region. So all these three things make it a unique economic crisis. Again, we note that South Asia has the highest population densities in the world, and this is particularly true of its urban areas. And this can make the infections easier in these places. And especially it affects the most vulnerable people who live in the urban areas, and this includes the slum dwellers and the domestic migrant workers. Again, regarding the economic outlook for the South Asian region, the report says that the South Asia will likely experience the worst economic performance of last 40 years. And the regional GDP growth will fall to a range of 1.8 to 2.8% in 2020. And earlier, the World Bank had projected a cumulative growth for the South Asian region at about 6.3%. Further, because of the economic crisis, the poor people are likely to lose their livelihood. And as a result, the poor and the migrant workers will again be pushed to poverty, and that too in rural areas. And that will further increase the inequality in the region. So, what should be done in order to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and how to reduce the impact of economic crisis? So the first measure that has been suggested by the report is that there is a need for early measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and in this the governments must focus on strengthening the disease surveillance and prevent the spread of virus. Again, for surveillance or proper surveillance of the spread of the disease, there should be use of digital technologies. And for example, India has recently launched the Setu app, and this app uses the location data from the person's smartphone to tell the users if they have been near someone who has already tested positive for the COVID-19. Again, the focus of the South Asian government should be on protecting the vulnerable populations. And as such, facilities and programs should be provided for providing the work and food, and also direct cash to the migrant workers and the poor people. And for this, digital technology can be deployed. Again, regarding the monetary and the fiscal policy, the focus of the government should be on expansionary policies. And in this line, the report says that the South Asian governments should adopt expansionary fiscal policies combined with monetary stimulus to enhance the money supply. And we already know that the government of India and the Reserve Bank of India have been taking steps in this direction. So these are few important highlights of the report of World Bank regarding the South Asian region, and also they have provided certain suggestions. And some of the points that have been highlighted by this report can be used in answering questions related to the economic crisis in the mains examination. Now in today's discussion, we have taken up three important articles, and the first was related to the challenges in the independent functioning of the World Health Organization. The second was related to the concept of social vaccine and its effectiveness in handling the pandemic of HIV/AIDS. And the third article was related to the economic crisis that the South Asian region is likely to face, which has been highlighted by a report of the World Bank. So in this background, do attempt these questions from your mains examination point of view, as we already note that these articles are extremely important for us from the mains examination point of view. Now with this we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.